In his moment of triumph, led by Macedon, he was preparing to carry out his life's ambition, which was to invade the Persian Empire.
He would never get there. Philip would meet an untimely demise at the hands of the ultimate insider. Just before Philip began his Persian conquest, he held a public celebration. As he marched alone ahead of his entourage to prove he had no one to fear, a bodyguard suddenly rushed forward and plunged a dagger into his chest. The man who had put Greece on the map was dead at 46.
Was he a lone assassin, or was there a bigger plot? We can never know for sure, because while the assassin was trying to escape, he was mowed down by Philip's guards.
Philip's dream of dominating the Persian Empire would not die with him, but only gather strength with the emergence of his son, a 20-year-old named Alexander. It was Alexander who would use Philip's army, engineers, and technology to far exceed even Philip's wildest ambitions, transforming the world into a Greek one.
Marriage was a key component in Philip's diplomatic strategy. Of his 7 wives, only one was a Macedonian.
In just 20 years, Philip II had transformed the Macedonians into a mighty army and became the absolute master of Greece. But Philip's assassination in 336 BC cut short his ultimate ambition and self-proclaimed destiny: to invade Greece's age-old enemy, Persia. Philip had conquered Greece. Now it would be up to his son to conquer the world. He was a man who became known throughout history as Alexander the Great.
Alexander was one of history's great commanders. He was absolutely brilliant on the battlefield. True enough, he inherits a great military machine, but he has to get the credit for leading this machine at a very young age.
Philip had laid the engineering groundwork for conquest. Now it was time for his son to finish the job. In 334 BC, Alexander led his Macedonian army of over 35,000 soldiers into battle against the Persian Empire. Persia was a massive superpower, dominating the lands of the Middle East and Asia Minor. Alexander and his army rampaged through what is now modern-day Turkey, carving deep inroads into Persian territory. But the Persians still had an advantage that Alexander had to neutralize if he hoped to conquer Greece's age-old enemy.
Alexander's got a problem. He doesn't have a fleet. So what he needs to do is to find a way to neutralize the Persian fleet. And his strategy is to fight the Persian navy on land by laying siege to and taking each of the great Persian naval bases.
Alexander continued to march south along the Mediterranean coast, laying siege to the cities and ports who resisted his advance. But it was the fortified and powerful city of Tyre that would provide Alexander.
It was an island, a small offshore island. The city actually lay on an offshore island, and that made it relatively impregnable in the eyes of the Tyrians themselves, since they had a great fleet. All of that changed in the late 4th century.
At first, Alexander tried diplomacy. He sent messengers out to the island, urging city leaders to accept a peace treaty. The answer was short and to the point. They killed Alexander's ambassadors and threw their bodies from the top of the walls into the sea. The stakes were high. If Alexander failed to take the city, it would send a message to the world he wasn't invincible. With Tyre protected from his land forces by the sea, it was up to his engineers to bring the battlefield to the city, where Alexander could fight the Tyrians face to face. Tyre would be an island no more.
What if the enemy refused to come out and fight you? Alexander realized that he could not allow his military operations to get bogged down in the face of fortifications. And that meant that he needed techniques and weaponry that could attack fortifications.
With mammoth walls and a fortified harbor and very little land around the walls, the city of Tyre was long thought to be impregnable. Thus, Alexander resolved to a very, very ambitious approach. He knew he couldn't take the city unless he did damage to the walls. So he had his engineers build a causeway, a bridge from the mainland to the island. Causeway was about half-mile long, 200 feet wide, 20 feet high. When the causeway was within striking distance, Alexander unleashed a hail of terror on the city, and then he deployed the only weapon he knew would end the battle, a siege tower.
The towers were a kind of multi-storied armored car that moved forward on wheels. Outside, they were fireproofed with rawhide, covering the entire wooden structure. Inside, a central staircase led to a series of platforms where oxabeles and other catapults launched missiles onto Tyre's walls. Down below, others used the tower as protection to wield a ground-level battering ram.
They literally wheeled them up to the wall. The men inside would be protected, and they would be shooting arrows at the defenders on the wall and trying to cross over onto the wall and to kill the defenders.
Alexander's siege towers pummeled the walls of Tyre for days. Once the fortress had been breached, Alexander went for the jugular. He unleashed a firestorm of reprisal upon the city that had resisted him.
The assault itself would really be a terrifying experience for everyone involved. The only way to signal would be through trumpets, so you have to imagine trumpets blaring, a tremendous noise of men attacking, flags blowing in the wind on the battlements of the city that was under attack. I think it would have been an extraordinary scene.
Alexander resumed his trek southward through Palestine. His confidence soaring, he now set his sights on the greatest empire the world had ever seen, Egypt. With its soaring pyramids and unrivaled colossal tombs, Egypt was an ancient culture Alexander revered. But there was another more practical reason Alexander coveted Egypt. It was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, whose wheat fields would be invaluable in feeding Alexander's expanding empire. But unlike Tyre, conquering the Egyptians required no bloodshed.
Alexander entered Egypt as a liberator and as a figure of extraordinary powers.
The Egyptians not only welcomed Alexander, they made him a god. In 331 BC, they crowned Alexander pharaoh, proclaiming him a son of Ammon, their most important deity. At age 24, Alexander had transcended mortality.
One can imagine that someone to whom extraordinary things happened, to whom all doors seemed to open themselves magically, to whom every endeavor was rewarded with victory, would think, well, perhaps I am, in some respect, a god. And I think that Alexander really did think this. He wasn't just pretending. He was trying to find out more about himself.
By the late 4th century BC, Greek cities were springing up in the wake of Alexander's marauding army. These cities served as centers of control and administration. But more importantly, they became a means of spreading a unifying fabric of Greek language, culture, and learning. The result would be a template of city engineering that would extend to the farthest regions of Alexander's empire.
Alexander ordered that his soldiers be clean-shaven so that enemies couldn't grab their beards in close combat.